find a few people here that have the really good and juicy stories, and I don't want to hold that up. But before we get underway, my name's Ken Hall. I'm on the Note Committee with the Memphis Music Foundation, and I wanted to bring forward first John Elkington, who established the Brass Note program in 1986 to tie the history of Beale to the current iteration and get John to tell you a little bit about why we do this and what it means. John, come on up.
Thank you, Ken, very much. You've all heard about the Big Bambino curse in Boston and with Babe Ruth, and you've obviously heard about the goat curse in Chicago, and our friend Silky Sullivan tried to break it a number of years ago by walking his goats around Wrigley Field. Today, this whole ceremony is about the Aldrich curse. You know, it rains for every Beale Street music festival. And we hope today to plant this note on Beale Street where the original Beale Street Music Festival took place and do away with that curse. So we appreciate all of you joining us today to help to rid us of the Aldrich curse where it rains every Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the Beale Street Music Festival. But we're very honored to be here tonight to recognize Lyman for his great contribution in being one of the founders of Memphis in May, and what a great event this has been, and what a great event the Beale Street Music Festival has become. It is one of the premier festivals in the country, and we're very fortunate that some of the greatest musicians, many of them who have guitars in this room, have been involved in the Beale Street Music Festival. The other wonderful thing is he becomes the 125th person on our Walk of Fame. When we started, no one recognized Memphis musicians or people who contributed to Memphis music, and no one has contributed, in my opinion, as much, and that's why I nominated him, than Lyman. Not only was he involved in the Beale Street Music Festival, but he was involved in helping to recognize many years ago Memphis musicians. And so on this street, not only do we have Elvis Presley and B.B. King, but we have all the great musicians and producers and people who made a contribution to this industry and this community. And so we are very grateful to be here tonight to recognize Lyman for his work, and to really recognize all of you, the people that were involved in Memphis in May from the very beginning. I rode over with Mayor Morris today to this event, and he'll be speaking, and we talked about what a great contribution Memphis in May has been to the economic development of our community. And when you look at the great entrepreneurs of our community, and when you look at the great things that have happened in our community, you have to rate Memphis in May as one of the greatest things. And so with that, I will turn, Ken, who do I introduce next?
Judge George Brown.
My good friend of many, many years, a great contributor to Memphis also, George Brown.
John, thank you. I didn't know I would be first. But I'm honored to be here to honor Lyman and honor Memphis in May. I see Tom Hutton and many others that started this organization. But let me be brief. The first barbecue contest was on the parking lot that is immediately north of the Orpheum. And probably the largest pit was probably twice the size of that table. And I think an elderly African-American woman won that year. We've come a long way. But the most important thing about Memphis in May and Lyman is the unintended consequences of Memphis in May. Lyman called a dear friend of mine, Harold Shaw, and Harold called me and a few others, and we all got together and we forgot that we were black and white and male and female, and Lyman had this crazy idea of having a festival in May. And through that whole process, all of us were in love with Memphis and in love with the whole festival concept, and see where we are today. I remember, I think it was Time magazine and New York Times talked about Memphis being a backwater town. Well, I've been here 73 years, and I'm still trying to find that backwater town that they talked about. I think we ought to give ourselves a hand. Yeah. And last but not least, we ought to give Lyman a hand for his vision, his stick-to-itiveness, and his focus in guiding us from where we started many, many years ago to where we are today. So Lyman, you deserve all the accolades, and I'm happy to be here to share this day with you.
Thank you very much, Judge. We've asked John Dudas, who was there in the very beginning, not only of Memphis in May, but of the rebuilding of downtown Memphis, and I'm sure John will have some good words about Lyman and this whole experience. John Dudas.
Thank you, John. When Lyman and I first met, which is almost 40 years ago, Lyman, believe it or not, downtown Memphis was probably at its lowest point. There were buildings that were vacant, deteriorated, and really, I think Memphians had almost given up on their downtown and on their city. And Lyman knew that something had to be done about that. He did not want to see our city suffer that kind of attitude. So he figured very strategically that what we needed to do was to bring Memphians back downtown to see this area in a different way. And they had to see it by enjoying the area, by having a good time. So that's where Memphis in May was born, really as a strategy to do that. And after the first event, which really made our downtown area sort of the stage of a Broadway show, we had people that were involved as actors on that stage. The Memphis Symphony, various bands, Memphis bands, other entertainers from the area. So it was really staged almost like a Broadway show. And thanks to the many volunteers that were assembled for the event, and really just a shoestring budget, the first event, though not well attended, you might say, it was a great success, and the tradition grew from there. So then, as a result, we started to see new restaurants opening up. Some of the businesses and the buildings that were vacant were being renovated. And then Lyman decided to become a downtown developer. And there were very few of those at that time, maybe not even a handful. And some people thought he was crazy because what he did is he bought an old vacant warehouse and he was going to turn it into 22, I remember the number, residential condominiums. And people were saying this is crazy to do this. But when he sold all of those condominiums, people started to take a different look at downtown and its potential. And matter of fact, he saved the best unit for himself. I remember that, the one on the very top. But at any rate, Memphis in May really paved the way for a whole new attitude about downtown. And even now, we're going to be honoring Lyman with a note on Beale Street. When Memphis May started, Beale Street, I know it's hard to believe for those of you who are new to Memphis or younger, was deteriorated, severely deteriorated. Most of the buildings were vacant. You wouldn't want to come down here. So it's really a great thing. Is there a picture of it? There it is. It's really a great thing that Lyman is being honored on the street, which, as a result of a lot of his work, actually had a new birth. And I think that we ought to give him a great round of applause and thanks for doing that for Memphis.